frankly, there are some huge questions for the man that is currently polling in the lead to become the next US president. What do you want to hear from Donald Trump on NATO?
Look, I get what... I'm not a fan. I'm not a great fan of Donald Trump. I'll put that out there. Although I'm quite amused by what he has to say about Prince Harry, but let's park that for the moment. You probably want to come back to that. I think what we need on NATO is the fact that he's engaged, whether we like it or not, and I think it's a really good thing. The United States is the arsenal of democracy and is a great defender of democracy, and frankly, democracy, the world formed after World War II by the United States and by Great Britain has actually extended life expectancy for billions of human beings, has done so much good in the world, has spread industrialization and health and education as basic rights excuse me, throughout the world. And we need that system to be defended. So I get what Trump says about other people pulling their weight, but we still need American leadership and we need American engagement in Europe, because I do not trust countries like France, where Macron is saying, oh, we're not going to give any weapons to Ukraine, but we'll send troops there. Incredibly dangerous, incredibly unhelpful. We still need the US to be supporting the Ukrainians and to be the backbone of NATO. And we need to be supporting them doing that. So we need to be stepping up to the mark as well. I worry that Trump will try to be too much of an isolationist.
Bob, you said at the start of your answer you're not a fan of Donald Trump. Is that the reason why?
No.
Too isolationist? What is it about him that you're worried about?
Look, I think a lot of the things he said have been genuinely offensive. I just don't think he's necessarily a particularly good man, I'll be blunt. And his relationship with Putin was, I think, extremely odd. But I hope he's learned his lessons, what can I say? And if he's going to win, I hope we can have a productive relationship with him. That will come much more easily with the Conservative government at the end of this year. I think the Labour Party, will do great damage to the transatlantic relationship if Trump's in, because clearly Trump's a very powerful man and he needs very careful handling, especially when it comes to NATO, especially when it comes to China. And the Americans actually ahead of the game on China, respect to them, but especially when it comes to Ukraine as well.
It's a significant issue, the UK-US relationship. The UK's always done best when it can be close to decision-making in Washington and often acts as a sort of bridge between the new world and the old world, between America and Europe. That's something that Margaret Thatcher did successfully, to some extent Tony Blair did successfully. But it is very tricky when you've got a bombastic, perhaps loose cannon in the White House. What do you think is the fundamental difference there when it comes to the Conservatives and the Labour Party on being able to deal with someone like Donald Trump?
A couple of things. Firstly, I think Republican administrations, whether it was their relationship with New Labour or whether it was Reagan and Thatcher or whether it was Trump, I think there is a tendency, and I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing, it's just an observation, there's a tendency for Republican administrations to be more Anglophile, to be more supportive of the UK, to want to have a closer relationship. Democrat presidents in recent decades, they've sort of distancing themselves from the Brits, it's slightly unfashionable, they're sort of embracing a new identity for America, far more Pacific focused. So I think with Republicans, we tend to get more listened to, and we get the potential to have a deeper relationship and a better relationship, and that's regardless whether it's Labour or Conservative. With Trump, I cannot see the Labour Party having a healthy relationship with Donald Trump, simply because most of them are absolutely going to hate him and are not going to be able to hide their dislike and their contempt for him. I think for the Conservatives, we are much more likely to be able to finesse that relationship successfully. I think he's much more likely to listen to Conservative voices on NATO, on Ukraine, on what we do about the global situation, which is getting much more dangerous and much worse. So I think, look, there are lots of reasons to vote Conservative at the end of this year. One of them is going to be that I think we'll handle that relationship with Trump very much better. And it is, look, the world is at a real turning point at the moment. We have a significant conflict in the Middle East, and it could be getting worse. We have a significant conflict in Eastern Europe, which could be getting worse. And there's a potential for conflict in Taiwan as well. So we live in a really dangerous world, and we need to make sure our voice is listened to in Washington.
And Bob, just lastly from me, you mentioned Prince Harry yourself. Nigel Farage will ask the President about, well, in the exclusive interview, which will be played at 7 o'clock tonight, he'll ask him about Prince Harry. What should happen if it's found that actually he did lie on his visa application about drug use? It seems that Donald Trump doesn't exactly say what should happen, but he certainly doesn't back him.
I suspect there's a very, very low chance that Harry will be kicked out of the United States, regardless of what he said on his visa form. And at this point, I'm very tempted, as the Americans would say, to plead the Fifth Amendment.
Well, very good, very good. And I suppose, finally from me, there's always been this sort of anticipation, question mark over the role of Nigel Farage were Donald Trump to become the next president of the United States. Could you imagine a world in which the United Kingdom finds some sort of diplomatic liaison role between the States and the UK for Nigel Farage, where he can perhaps help this country get the best sort of trade deal with the United States, build that relationship across the Atlantic? Is there perhaps a role for Nigel?
Yeah, look, I think there should be. Look, I disagree with some of what Nigel Farage says. I agree with others. I see nothing wrong with him being part of a conservative family. I think what reform is, all reform, I'm afraid, is going to achieve come the election, is to dilute the Conservative vote, to make it more likely that Labour will win, and more likely that Labour will be kept in for longer. So that is the fundamental problem with voting for anyone apart from the Conservatives. And I hope when inflation keeps coming down, the interest rates come down, the mortgage rates will come down, we'll be protecting the triple lock, we're having a growing economy, and we'll have the Rwanda flights off, and we'll have legal migration down as well. There are going to be lots of good reasons to vote Conservative and not split that Conservative vote. I personally think that Nigel Farage has been one of the most significant politicians, whether you like him or dislike him, in our country. And for those people who are very sniffy about him, I don't get that. I don't agree with everything he says, but I respect a great deal of what he said and what he's tried to do. And I think he's a significant figure. I don't see why he's not in the House of Lords. And if there was a Conservative victory this winter, which is looking unlikely at the moment, but I hope we can turn those polls around, I would love a role for him. Yeah, I think we need to... I think he's a major figure in our country. I frankly don't care if the left hate him. They hate him because he's been successful and because he helped deliver Brexit. And I think actually the sovereignty of this country, and I'm half German, but I think for me the sovereignty of this country and actually be self-governed is a thing that we should all be proud of. And I thank Farage for that role. But what we need to do, yeah, for sure, let's give him a role afterwards. If Trump wins and we get Rishi back in, for sure. I don't know what that role is. If it's ambassador, I think it's probably a bit too political for Nigel Farage. But a roving ally, for sure, a roving friend of the UK and US, bring us together. Why not?
Some kind of role. There we go. Thank you very much indeed, Bob Seeley, member of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. Bob.